So, do you want to learn how you can use CSS Grid to build a website like Discord? Then you came to the right video. Hello world, Julio here. And in today's video, we are going to be attempting to recreate Discord's website using nothing but CSS Grid. So if you're just getting into CSS Grid or you're trying to learn more about it, this is the perfect video for you, because we will be using CSS Grid to kind of position the items exactly where we want them to be. Now, before we get into it, I want to address something. I noticed that after looking at my YouTube analytics, a lot of the viewers are not really subscribed to me, with only around 20% of the viewers being my subscribers. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me because I have around 48,000 subscribers now. So be sure to click on the bell icon and turn on all notifications, because what happens is that sometimes, even though you're subscribed to a channel, YouTube doesn't deliver the new videos to your feed. So if you never want to miss one of my videos, make sure you turn on all notifications. Now, let's jump right into it. So just like I do with every other video, let me start by giving you guys a brief overview of the files I have here. So I'm starting off with a basic HTML5 template. Here I have the SVG markup, which we are going to be using for the wave. And the reason why we have the markup itself is because that's going to allow us to animate it as opposed to just using the image itself. Within the CSS file, here I'm importing the fonts, and then I set up some base styles, which I'm not really going to get into right now, but I will later on once we get into the CSS portion of the video. Then here at the end, I also have commented out the keyframe animation for the wave. The reason why I have it here already is because I'm not an expert on SVGs by any means, especially animating them. So that's going to be pretty simple to just basically copy and paste, or in this case, just uncomment it out once we need it later on. So here you can also see the root folder, the assets folder, and everything else that we need for this project. So if you plan on following along, make sure that you grab the files from the link in the description below. Now, to begin, what I'll do, actually let me just minimize this so that I have more room to work with. So once inside of the body, what I want to do is have a section here. And this section is going to have the class of hero. Then inside of this hero section, I'm going to have a header, and it will have the class of main header, as well as the class of container. Then inside of it, let me just keep some spaces just so that it's easier for you guys to keep up and not get lost with everything just being close to one another. So again, what I want to do here is just have a nav, so I'll use the nav tag, and then the class of main nav. So inside of the nav itself, I'm going to have all the information that we need as far as the logo, navigation items, hamburger menus, and all that. So to begin, let's have an anchor tag with the class of logo. We can just simply point this back to the index.html, and then we will have an image. To find the image, we will reference a root folder, then the assets folder, and then the images folder inside of it. Then what we want to grab here is the image with the name of logo.svg. Now underneath of this anchor tag, we will have a nav list. So for that, we will use a UL with the class of nav list. Inside of it, we will have an li with the class of nav item. And then finally, we will have an anchor tag with the class of nav link. And yes, I do realize that you can do this a lot faster with Emmet by just using this, for example. You go here, for example, UL, LI, and so on. But the reason why I prefer doing it this way is just in case we have some new viewers that are not really familiar with Emmet. So this way they're not really overwhelmed or get confused in some way. Now back to this, for the href, I'll just use a placeholder. Then I'm going to copy this, paste it down below a few more times, and now we can go ahead and put the information within the anchor tags that we need. So the first link is going to be for download. Then for the second one, we can say why Discord. Then for the third one, we'll say nitro. And I hope this looks good in the video and it's not too small. Right now, I think I'm doing 125% zoom. So hopefully all the text here on the browser shows up. Well, at least big enough, because sometimes people do complain that the text is too small. Anyways, back to the navigation. Here underneath of Nitro, we will have safety. And finally, we will have support. So that's going to be it for the header / navigation. Underneath of the header, still within the hero, what we want to do is have a div, and it will have the class of row and the class of container as well. So this is what we are going to be using later on to set up our little grid system. And by this, I mean this class of row. The container is here just for alignment purposes, as well as to limit how wide the content within this container is going to stretch to. Anyways, back within the row, here I'm going to have a div with the class of hero content wrap. And inside of this div, what I want to do is have a title. So for that, I'll use an h1 with the class of title, as well as a second class of primary title. Then for the text, we can just say your place to talk. Underneath, I'm going to have a p tag with the class of, let's say, hero description. And what I'll do is just grab the text from Discord's website and paste it right in. You guys can do the same thing if you want to speed up the process, or you can just pause the video and copy this and then continue later. Now, underneath of the p tag, what I'll do here is have a group of buttons. So that is going to be another div. And again, let me just create a little bit of separation here. This div is going to have the class of hero btn, and then we can say, what will we do? Hero btn group. That sounds pretty good to me. Then here I'm going to have an anchor tag, and this anchor tag is going to have the class of btn. It will have a second class of btn large, and then it will have another class of btn light. Then the href can just have a hash in there as a placeholder. Here I want to have an icon. So the class for the icon that we want is going to be bx, and then a secondary class of bx download. And as you can see, the little download icon is now showing up. So still within the anchor tag next to this icon, what I want to do is add some text. So this one will say download, missing the N, and then for Windows. So this is going to be different depending on which operating system you're on. So for example, if you're on Mac, I will say download for Macs, or Linux, and so on. Now underneath here, what I want to do is actually, let me just copy this, paste it down below, and here we are going to change this btn light to dark, and then we don't need the icon, so we can just go ahead and get rid of it. And then we can just change the text to something like open Discord in your browser. And that's going to be it pretty much for this header / hero section. Although I did plan on adding the hamburger menu and the close icon for the mobile navigation later on once we get to that point. But since this is a mobile first approach, I might as well just add it now. So go back to the nav, and within the nav, you're going to go underneath of this UL, and then you're going to have a div with the class of nav items right. And this should be a period. And front of it, just like so. Then now I'm going to have the login button actually, which for some reason I forgot all about it. So the login button here, is going to be an anchor tag with the class of btn, the class of btn small, the class of btn light, and the class of btn login. And I know what you're thinking, that's a lot of classes, but it's pretty helpful because this way I can just use classes later on within other buttons without having to, for example, say the btn within the nav items, the btn within the row, and so on. This way I can just easily target them. So here for the text, we'll just say login. Then underneath of this anchor tag, I'm going to have another small group, and this is going to be for the Hamburger menu. And what I'll do here is say that I want to have a span, and the span is going to have the class of, let's call it mobile toggle. And then here we just simply want to have two icons. The first one is going to be for the Hamburger menu icon. So the first class is bx, then bx menu, just like so. And now you can see that the Hamburger menu is showing up. Then we'll do the same thing here, just duplicating it. And then we can just simply change this menu class here to x. And that's pretty much it for this header navigation, as well as the hero and all the content within it. So to continue now, what we are going to do, let me just leave it here so that later on we can just come back when we're ready to continue with the other sections. But for the time being, let's now go inside of the main.css. So as I mentioned here, I'm importing all the fonts that we are using from this fonts folder. Then here I have some base styles, which is a basic reset of my on my margins and paddings, and setting the box sizing to border box, and that just makes the math when it comes to sizing your elements a lot easier. Then for my HTML document, I'm setting the root font size to 10 pixels, but I'm doing it in percentages, which is 62.5%, because it's a lot easier when you're working with rems. Well, the 10 pixels and the other reason for the percentages is so that when you use zoom, like I'm doing here, everything is just going to scale a lot better. Then here I'm defining some custom properties. As you can see, I have custom properties for my colors, for my font sizes, depending on whether I'm using a regular font on the body and so on, titles. Then I also have some custom properties here for all of my fonts, including headings. Then I also have some custom properties here for my fonts. Then the number of columns that I'll be using, we're going to be starting with 4, but we're going to work our way up to 12 later on larger screens. Then section spacings and a container width. Then here, once we get to the base styles for the body, I'm setting the font size here of the body to be the general font size, which is this 2rem. Then for the font family right here, this is going to be the main font family, which is light. And then for the text decoration here to none, display inline block, again, it just has to do with spacing and how much space this anchor tag is going to be taking. Then my image right here, I'm doing a max width of 100%, and that's just going to make sure that my images never overflow their parent. Finally, I'm using display block here because by default, images are going to have a little bit of space underneath them, and that's just going to get rid of them. And finally, what we are going to be doing now is targeting the hero. So this is going to be pretty basic for now. All I'm going to do here is just have a background image. So for that URL, we will go inside of the assets folder and then the images folder, and we want to find the hero BG. Then we want to make sure that the position is at the center, and then we can just say that the background size will be cover. Just like so. Then I'm going to select the main header. And for the main header here, what I want to do is just have a height of 8 rem, then a padding of 0 top and bottom, and 2.4 rem left and right. Then here for my container, I'm going to set the max width to the variable of container width. Then I'll set the margin to be 0 top and bottom and auto left and right. And that's just going to center it here in the middle once we get to larger screens, as you can see. So back to the small screens, because that's what we are working with first. Now I'm going to select my main nav. And what I want to do here is set a height to be 100% of the parent, which is this main header. So I'm setting it to 100%. Then display will be a flex. Then align items, not self, is going to be center. And then I want to justify the content to be of space between. So that's just going to create some separation between them. The image is somewhere around here, but you can't see it for the time being till I actually give a fixed width. Then what I'll do here is select my logo. So now that when I give it the fixed width of 12.4 rem, you'll see that it will show up. Finally, I'm going to get rid of the nav list here because we don't want to see it. So nav list. And we'll say display of none. Then let's target the nav right. And I'm going to give this a display of flex. And then I want to align my items to the center. And that's going to make sense later on once I size up this login button right here. So speaking about the button, let me actually give my buttons a hover effect. So I'll apply the hover effect on every single button. And this is just going to be a box shadow, which will be pretty basic. 0 on the X. For the Y, I'll do 0.8 rem. And then here for the spread, I'll just do 1.5 rem. And the color is going to be black with a transparency of 0.2. So now if I hover over my button, you can see a subtle box shadow. Now I will select the BTN small and I'll give this a font size. Then I'm going to give it some padding as well. So I'm going to start off with 0.7 top and bottom, 1.6 left and right. I'm also going to be giving this a background color, but to do so, I'll use the BTN light class. And the background color here, I'll use the variable of the color light. Then for better contrast, although it already has pretty good contrast, I'll use the variable of the dark color. I also want to set a border radius here of 4 rem, and that's just going to give us the rounded corners that you see right here. So what else do I want to do here? Well, let me also give this a hover effect because I want to change this text on hover to be the brand color, which is a purple. So I'll say BTN light, unhover, and then the color will be the bar, the variable of brand color. And that looks pretty good. So what do I want to do next? Well, next I want to target the BTN login itself. And what I want to do here is apply a little bit of margin right. And I'll do something small like 1.6 rem. And actually, let's make the size of the button slightly larger by setting the line height to be 1.8, just like so. Now that I have the basic styles here for the login button, what I'll do is select the mobile toggle. And what I want to do here is just give this a display of flex. And again, this is just for alignment purposes. Then the font size here will be 3.6 rem. The color will be bar light. And then the cursor, I will set it to pointer because I just want to give it the clickable effect. Finally, we have to hide this X. So we'll say BX close, or not close, this one is actually X. And just in case somewhere down the line, for example, let's say that we want to add in another of these icons, the X icons, let's make sure that we don't have styles that clash. So for this, I'll just apply a class of btn close. And then I'll do the same thing for the hamburger menu, although we don't really need it, but like I said, it's just a good practice. So now, as opposed to targeting every single icon with that class, we can just say btn close. And then we can just say display none. Now, this is where things get really fun because now we will get into the grid system. So for that, let's select the row. We'll give this a display of grid to make it a grid container. Then for the grid template columns, we are going to repeat the number of columns that we have. In this case, it's only 4. So let's do var columns. So this is the number of columns. And then comma, and then we want to specify by how much. So we'll do by 1 fraction each. So just so that you guys can see a lot better what's going on, let me inspect the element. Then here we'll just find the grid. And we can't really see what's going on here, so let me just make this bigger right here. Now we can show the grid. And since we actually have plenty of room, I'll move this over here, make this slightly bigger, just like so. And now we can kind of just visualize the grid itself. So Chrome has gotten a lot better than this. They didn't used to have this a while back, which is why Firefox, well, Firefox still is a lot better when it comes to working with grid because it's just a lot easier to debug it. But this is going to be pretty sufficient. As you can see now, we have our grid with 4 columns, which is what we're going to be starting with on mobile devices. So something else that I want to do is apply grid gap. So I'll just say gap and use a shorthand here, so 0, and then I'm going to say 2 rem here on the left and right. So that's going to be it for this row. Actually, not really. I also had to apply the padding here for the row, which is going to be the variable of section padding, or section spacing, I should say. So what's next? Well, like I said, now we're going to have some fun with grid, positioning elements exactly where we want them to go. So first, let's begin by selecting the hero content wrap. And this will be very basic. So what I want to do here is just simply say grid column. So now, where do I want to position this? Well, I don't really want to position this anywhere. All I wanted to do is just take all the available space within the grid. So all I have to do is just say span 4. But since we already have a variable for it, we might as well just use it. So var grid number of columns or number of grid columns. And for example, if later on you decided to maybe change it to 5, then this is going to change to 5 automatically. Then underneath of this, I'm going to change the color to be of white. So that's going to be the variable with the color of white. Well, not white, but light. Underneath, I will select the title, which is just going to be general styles for the heading. And the font family here that I want to use is the var. And this is going to be the main font family in bold. Now I'm going to select the primary title to style the main title individually. And here I'm going to set the font size to be of bar, and then primary title font size. Finally, I want to change the line height here to be 120%. Then I'm going to select the hero description. And this one is going to have a line height of 3.2 rem. And what did I do there? Line height, 3.2 rem. I want to give this some additional separation, so I'm going to have a margin top, and it will be 2.4 rem. Then I'm going to style the buttons that we have right here. And we can actually just get rid of this grid right here because we don't need to see it for now. So I'll select the btn with the class of large. Then what do I want to do with this button? Well, I want to increase the padding. And that's going to be 1.6 rem top and bottom. And then 3.2 rem left and right. What I want to do now is give this a border radius. Again, we just want to be consistent and give it the same rounded corners. So border radius is going to be 2.8 rem. Then what I want to do is select the colors individually here. So underneath, I'm going to select the btn dark. And here I'm going to change the background color to be bar, and it will be the dark color. For contrast, we also have to change the color of the font to light. And what else? So something else that I also want to do is make sure that this icon is perfectly aligned with the text. So let me select the btn light that is inside. Actually, let me do it up here instead. Keep things in order. So btn group, and then btn light. So the btn light that's within this btn group, which is this one. And I'm going to give this some margin. So the margin that is going to be at the top is going to be 2.4 rem. Then to the right, I'll do 2.4 rem as well, 0 to the bottom and 0 to the left. Then I'll turn this into a flex container. So I'll do a display of flex. Actually, inline flex is what I want, because if I do flex by itself, it's going to create a lot of issues because it's going to make the button pretty big, as you can see, which is not what we want. Then underneath, I'm going to select the hero btn group, and then btn light, and then the icon inside of it. Then here, I'll say align self to the center, just like so. And I also want to add a little bit of margin right for separation. And that's going to be it for this button. We also have to create some additional spacing here between them. So what I'll do here is just target the btn dark. And I'm going to give this a margin top of 2.4 rem. And then I'm also going to create a background color for this. So btn dark. So on hover, what I want to do is change the background color, and it's going to be the following hex value. So since we are only going to be using this here, I didn't really create a variable for it or custom property. So I just have the hex by itself. And that's going to be it for the most part. So if we hover over it, I think a transition here would be nice as well. So let's do that. So transition, background color over 0.5 seconds. And that looks pretty good. So now that we have taken care of the hero section, what we can do is just go back to the index.html. Let me just briefly close this because we don't really need it for now. And we can get started with the next section, which is going to be for the collaboration. So here underneath of the hero section, we will have a section with the class of collaboration. Then here again, we will repeat the container and the row. Just like so. And the layout here is going to be pretty simple. So the first thing that I want to have here is an image. So the image is going to have the class of grid image. It's not the most creative name, but kind of just gets the point across. Then again, side of the assets folder, then the images folder, and you want to grab the image with the name of section 1. Then underneath of this image, what we want to do is very basic as well. So here I'm going to group everything by just having a container div with the class of text group. Again, not the most creative name, but it kind of just works as it is. If you want to change the name to something else, then feel free to do so. And then here I'm going to have an h2 with the class of title, and then a second class of secondary title. And then we can just say, actually I'll just copy the text from the Discord website because it's just going to make it a lot easier on myself as opposed to just copying everything manually. Feel free to do the same, or if you have the time, copy the pause the video and copy the text, and then unpause the video when you're ready to continue. So next, what I want to do is have a p tag, which I'm not going to really apply a class to since this is going to be pretty basic. And once more, I'm going to grab the text from the Discord website and paste it right in. And this is pretty much it for this section. So all we have to do now is just go back inside of the main.css so that we can make this look a lot better. So for that, let's go ahead and inspect the element once more. Click it here so that we can visualize the grid, just like so. So now what I want to do is have a comment for this section, so collaboration. And underneath, I want to have the styles for this particular section. So I'm going to start with the grid image. And here I'm going to apply a little bit of margin to the top of 2.4 rand. Then what I want to do is basically position the items exactly where I want them, because as you can see now they're just like taking one fraction as I specified. And what I want to do is just have this image basically stretch all the way across to the end of the fourth grid item here that we have, or grid cell. And to do that, we can just simply say grid column, and then we can just say that we want it to span all four, just like so. And the beauty about grid is that depending on what you specify here, it will actually create more if that's what you want it. But obviously we don't want that, so let's just go back to 4. And automatically the other one is just going to fall underneath it. So now what I'll do is select the text group. And here I'm going to add a little bit of margin top as well, but not as much as the other one. So I'll do 2 rem instead. And then I basically just want to do the same thing here and have this content span all across the available space. Now you could also do the variable if that's what you wanted. So you could do number of columns here, and it's going to be the exact same thing because by default this is 4, but the only reason why I'm doing 4 is because later on in the next breakpoint we're going to be having 8 columns instead of 4. So this way, as opposed to having this, if I have 4 here and 4 here, then by default on the next breakpoint it will already be responsive because it will be stretching side by side. If I just have this, it will just stay the same, each one of them on their own row. So that's the only reason why I'm doing the value of 4 here. Then underneath of this text group, what I want to do is target my secondary title. And here, I'm just going to manipulate the font size. For that, I'll use the variable of secondary title font size. Then text group P to select the paragraph within the text group. And then I want to create a little bit of separation, so I'll do a margin top of 2 rem. And then a line height of 3.2 rem. So that's going to be it for this section. The other ones are going to be pretty basic as well. So let's go back inside of the index.html. And this is where we are going to have the first wave. So to do that, well, we already have the SVG code. So we can just go ahead and comment that out. And we will just have it there underneath. And now we have the wave. So for the time being, it's black. And we actually have a little bit of spacing here at the bottom. But let's not worry about that for now. We'll worry about it later once we get to the CSS portion for this section. Or the following section, I should say. So underneath of this SVG, what I want to do is have the next section, which is going to be a section with the class of voice channel. Again, this is going to be extremely basic because it's essentially the same thing. So we can actually get away with copying what we have here and pasting it in here. And now all we have to do is just modify it. So back inside of the Discord website, let me just grab this, paste it in here, and then I'll just go ahead and grab the text for the p tag. Now, there's also one small difference here that I want to point out, is that I want to apply some additional classes. So the image is going to have the class of order 2, and then the text group is going to have a class of order 1. And the reason for that is because I want to be able to switch the images that we have right here on the next breakpoint. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and basically copy this SVG once more and paste it underneath. So now we have the wave between the section itself on the top and the bottom, which is exactly what we want. This one at the bottom doesn't look right, but we're going to basically invert it so that it basically turns around, if that makes sense. Right now, once we get into the CSS, because like I said, this is pretty much done. One last thing. It's just changing the image. For example, this one is going to be the image number 2. So again, let's go back inside of main CSS, and then we'll just create another comment. This one, I believe we called it voice channel. So we'll use the same thing. And then underneath here, we can continue with the styles. So the first thing that I want to do is change the color of this section. So let me just select the section itself, voice channel, and then I'll set the background color to be a variable with the name off-white color, just like so. Then I'm going to select the wave. So the wave is going to have the color here, which is going to be the same. So var of white. And we also want to make it a display of block, because as you can see here, we have a little bit of space in between them. So if we make it a display of block, that's going to get rid of it. Just like so. Then we have to go ahead and select the path, which is this right here, which has the class of wave path. And what we're going to be doing now is applying the animation to it. So let's go back here, uncomment this out. And as I mentioned, I'm no expert when it comes to SVGs, which is why I just copied the code. So I can't really explain what's going on here. So now that we have the keyframe animation for it, all we have to do is just say wave path. And in here, what we want to do is just say wave animation, which is the name of the animation that we have right here. So first we have to do animation, then the name of the animation, and then the duration is going to be 20 seconds. Linear, it will be infinite, and it will basically alternate. So it's going to be going back and forth. Just like so. And as you can see, like, it's really subtle, but it's there. So if I make this, for example, last 1 second, you can see that it moves a lot faster and it just goes back and forth, which is why we are doing something slower, like 20 seconds. Another issue that we have right here is with the wave at the bottom. As you can see, it doesn't look right. So we have to basically make it so that we can flip it around. And for that, we will use the transform and matrix function. So underneath of this animation, we'll select the wave inverted. And does it already have the class? Yes, it does. Well, the issue is that this one has it as well, which is something we don't want it on the one at the top. We only want it on the one on the bottom. So to fix that, all we have to do is transform. And then we can say transform matrix. So this is going to be taking 6 values. The first one is going to be the scale x, which we will have at 1. The second one is going to be for skew x, actually not skew x, but skew y, which we'll have at 0. Then we have a skew x, which is 0 as well. And then we have scale y, which is -1. And that's going to flip it around once we finish adding the rest of the values, which is for translate x and then translate y. And as you can see now, the wave is now inverted, which is exactly what we want. I'll leave a link in the description below for the transform matrix function, just so that you guys can look over it if you want to learn more about it. Then what I want to do is go on, well, before we continue, we actually have to build the other section that we need. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So again, for this next section, we can actually just get away with copying what we have right here for this one, because they're all exactly the same, except for maybe some tweaks here and there. So this one, I'm going to call it, we can say moderation tools. And then we can just switch this image to be here number 3. And from there, all we have to do is just basically modify the text. So since I already have the website here pulled up on my other monitor, I can just go ahead, copy it and paste it in. And then do the same thing for the p tag, just like so. So this particular section is exactly the same as the rest of them, so we don't really have to do anything to it, which means that we don't have to go into the CSS. We can just go ahead and copy this SVG, paste it underneath, and we can work on the next section right away. The only thing that we have to do here is just remove this inverted class, because we only want this wave to be at the top. So for this other section, what we have to do is a little bit different because we don't really have the images in this order in larger screens. So I'm going to have a section, and this section is going to have the class of video call. And then we will repeat the row and then the container. Then in here, I'm going to have the text group. Let me actually go here, text group, and then, well, we could have just because this is exactly the same. So let me just copy this. And actually it's a good thing that I did that, because then I would have never found out this closing tag mistake that I had here. And then I can just go ahead here and paste it, and then once more I can just go ahead and grab the text from the Discord website and paste it right in, just so that I can go ahead and save a lot more time. And then finally, we just need the image itself. So I should have grabbed that as well. Paste it underneath of this text group. And then we can just remove the order and change this one to section 4. Just like so. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and move back to the CSS. So let's create another comment, the video call, then select the video call section, change the background color to match the wave, so var, and then this is going to be the off-white. Just like so. So now everything matches. What I want to do next is increase the padding bottom that this has. So I'll say video call, and then find the row inside of it, and I'm going to say padding bottom, and it will be 8 rem. Then I'm going to select the text group within the video call, and this one is going to basically span across as many columns as we have available, regardless of the screen size. So for example, now it will take 4, once we move up to 8, it will take 8, and then once we move to 12, it will take 12. So grid column, and we'll say span var grid columns, or num of grid columns. I never pronounced this thing in the right order. Finally, I want to make sure that this takes 100% of the available space. I also want to give this text group P a little bit of margin top more. So video call, text group P, and then I'll apply a margin top of 2.4 rem. And actually, I don't want to apply the width here. What I want to do is apply a margin top of 0. Then, underneath of this paragraph, what I want to do next is select the video call and then the grid image. So here is where I want to apply the width of 100%, because I want it to stretch the entire width of its parent. Then what I want to do is basically the same thing here. I want this image to span all the available columns, just like so. And then I'll give it a margin top of 2.4 rem. So now we have one more section to go, including the footer. Let me actually make this bigger just so that we can see how it's going. So far everything looks pretty good. There's still a few things that we have to change later on, obviously, when it comes to the media queries, but let's not worry about that for now. So here within the index.html, what we have to do now is have another section, And this section is going to have the class of download. Again, we'll repeat the div with the class of row and container. And this one is going to be a little bit different as well. So I'm also going to be applying a secondary class here, or a third class I should say, of remove grid. Because in this particular situation, I don't really want to be using the grid. And then I'm going to have an image. This image is going to be inside of the assets folder, just like the rest of them. Then the images folder, and it will have the name of Sparkles. And I'm also going to give this a class. Just like so. Then I'm going to have an H2. And this is really basic, so I won't even bother copying it from the website. So ready to start your journey. And then underneath, I'm going to have an anchor tag. And this will just have a placeholder. Let me actually give this anchor tag a class of BTN, another class of BTN large, and then finally a final class of BTN brand. Then inside of it, I'm going to have an icon with the secondary class of BX download. And then next to it, I'm going to have the text download for Windows. And that's going to be all for this particular section. So let me scroll down so that you guys can see what's going on. So now that we have that, let's go back to the main.css. And what did I call this one? Download. And we'll have another comment. Then underneath, what I want to do is select the download container. Well, not the container, but the download section. And going to apply a background color here, which is going to be the same one. So I'll do background color, let's do off-white. Off-white, where are you? Right there. So next, I'm also going to give this the position of relative. Relative, not revert. Just like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and select the download and then remove grid. And this is just to be more specific. I could just do remove grid and it's going to be the same thing, but it doesn't really matter. And then I'll do here a display of block. And now the image that we have in there is going to show up. And then I'm going to get rid of the padding that we have at the top by saying padding top, saying 0, and then text align to the center. Then what I'll do is set my sparkles to be a display of inline block. Just because I want that little space that they have by default. And we don't really need this because I thought I was going to be using something with position absolute in here, but that's not going to be the case. So what do we want to do next? Well, we want to style this button right here. So under sparkles, well, before that, let me actually style the H2. So download H2, and the font size here will be 3.2 rem. Just like so. Something else that I want to do here is change the font family. What are the options here again? So I have 3 of them. So I'll do medium for this one. The font family, var medium, And then underneath, what I'm going to do is select the BTN brand. And I'm going to change the background color here. Var brand. Then I'm going to change the color of the text inside of it to be the light color. And should I add a transition there as well? I think I will. So transition is going to be on the background color over 0.5 seconds. And I guess I could have just, since I used it on the other darker button, I guess I could have just placed it on the single BTN class and it would be the same, but at this point I'm just too lazy to go back and do it. Feel free to do so if you want to. However, I'll just continue. So now we'll continue with the hover effect. So BTN, and this is for the brand, and it should be on hover. So here, what I'll do is just basically have a lighter one, and let's just say that the background color is going to have the following hex, which is 8E8, and then 1E1. And that looks pretty good. So I'm also going to be applying a margin top here, just for separation of a rem, just like so. And just let me target this as a whole because I think, am I using the BT? Oh, we are using the BTN brand within the footer as well. So I think I'll be a little bit more specific here when applying the margin top to the BTN brand because I don't want it to apply to the one on the footer as well. So I'll do the margin top here just by itself. And now we shouldn't have any single issues when we get into the footer. So since we are already talking about the footer, let's go take care of that right now. So back within this index.html. So we'll begin by having a footer with the class of main footer. Then in here, I'm going to repeat the same row and container. And then inside, let me just create some separation here. Since this is going to have a lot of content. So inside of this row, what I want to do is just have basically different information boxes for each item that we have within the footer as far as like the links and the groups. So I'm going to have a div with the class of info box. And then I'm going to have an h4, which is going to be the footer title. And I'll say your place to talk. Then here, what do I want to do? So underneath of this, I want to have the languages. And then I'm just going to have an image. The source for the image is going to be inside of the images. Well, the assets first, then the images folder. And this one is going to be the one with the name of flag. Then underneath, I'm going to have a span. And the span, we'll say English, USA. And then I'm going to have an icon next to it with the class of BX and another class of BX chevron down. Let's see how that's looking so far. Looks pretty good. So the next thing that I want to do now is add the social media icons. So underneath here, what I'll do is have a div with the class of social media. And then I'm going to have 4 anchor tags. So the anchor tags are going to have the class of, let's do something like smlink. and I want 4 of them. And I probably shouldn't have done that because it's just so messy using Emmet. So we'll just keep it as it is. So here, the placeholder, inside of it, I'm going to place the icon, which is going to have the class of bx, and another class of bx. We can do bxl Twitter. Just like so. Now we can go ahead and copy each one of them a few more times, and then we can just change the name of the platform. So this one is going to be for Instagram. Then we want Facebook, Square, finally, this one is going to be for YouTube. So now that we have everything we need, for the second one, we're basically going to just have some footer links, which I'm going to call footer links group. But before we do that, we actually need to add something called a spacer. Since we're going to have a lot more grid items, or cells, I should say, I want something kind of in between that's just going to basically be filler, but like nothing is going to be in there, if that makes sense. Well, if it doesn't, that's all right. We'll go more into it once we get to the CSS portion. For the time being, it doesn't really matter anyways, because we will hide it on really small screens and we will show it later on. So underneath of this, so here we have the info box. We find the closing div for it. And underneath, we will have a div with the class of spacer. Then underneath of here, we are going to have the footer links group. Then an h5 with the class of footer title. And in here, actually I can just keep that on one line since it's really short. I'll just say product. So underneath of this anchor tag, I'm just going to have a lot more anchor tag. Well, not an anchor tag, but the h5, I'm going to have a lot more anchor tags with the class of footer link. And we can just use a placeholder here. And I'll just say download. So for each individual link, obviously you want to have different text that represents what each one of them leads to as far as like the pages. But for this example, I don't really have the time to just do every single link individually as far as the text. So what I'll do is just copy them and paste it underneath. Even though they're going to be the same, it's kind of like the same concept. The only thing you have to do here is just change the text if that's what you really wanted to. So first one I'll have, I think it's 5, I have one more. Now the rest of them are going to be exactly the same, and we need a few more groups. We need like 3 more groups, so we'll just copy this. Right here, paste down below. And then once more. Something else that we are going to need within this row and container is the horizontal line. So for that, we're actually going to be using a div with the class of divider. We could also use an HR, but I'm just going to stick with a div for now. Now, underneath of this row and container that we have, we are going to have another row and container. And this one is also going to have a class of remove grid. Then in here, I'm going to have an anchor tag, and I'm going to apply the class of logo. And then, actually, I can just point this back to the index.html as well. Inside of here, I'm going to have the same image, and again, assets, images, and then logo. So for my second item here, it's just going to be another anchor tag, and it will be button. So anchor tag BTN, BTN small, BTN brand, missing the N, and then finally we can just add some text. that says login. And this is going to be it pretty much for the structure of the footer. The only thing that we have to do now is go ahead and make it look great. So back inside of the main.css, let's begin by targeting the footer title. Well, actually, no. Let's just take care of the padding that we have from the footer row. So let's create a comment, main footer. And actually, the footer has a background color, so let me just tackle that first. So background color, var, which is going to be dark. Then for the color, var light. And then as far as the padding, 8 rem to the top, 2.4 rem to the left and right, and then 6.4 rem to the bottom. Now I'm going to select the master footer. Well, I'm already inside of the master footer, which is the main footer. And what I want to do is select the row that's inside of it. And then I'll just get rid of the padding that the row has. Just like so, since we already applied padding to the footer itself. The next thing that I want to do is target the info box. And I want this to span 4 of the grid columns, basically, so everything all across. So grid column, span 4. Just like so. I'm also going to apply a margin bottom for separation of 5.6 rem. Then I'm selecting the footer title. And here, I'll just change the color to be var brand color. Next, I'm going to select the info box footer title because obviously we don't want every single one of them to be purple. And this one is just going to have a font size of 3.2 rem. Then for the font family, I'll do var main font family medium. Just like so. Now, let me just style the languages. And here I'm going to play around with the margin. Then I'll say that margin top is going to be 2.4 rem, as well as the bottom, and then 0 left and right. Display here, flex. Now they're all next to each other. What I want to do next is align my items to the center. Align items, not content. Having a hard time typing. So now they're lining up perfectly. Finally, I want to set the font size to be 1.4 rem, which is going to be a little bit smaller. Now languages, IMG. And then the width for this is going to be 2.4 rem. Languages, span. So the margin here, 0 top and bottom, 0.8 left and right. And now for the SM link, the font size here is going to be 2.3 rem. Then for the color here, we can do inherit. Also going to set a margin right here of 2 rem. Just like so. Now, as far as the spacer here, because you can see we have the space there. So spacer, we'll just go ahead and say display none because we don't really need it for now. Then I'm going to select my footer links group. And then the margin bottom here is going to be 4 rem. The font size will be 1.6 rem. And then I want my grid column here to span 2, just like so. And just to better show you guys what's going on, let me just click here so that we can visualize the grid. So as you can see, each one of them is taking 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's exactly what we want. Next, what I'm going to do is select my footer links group and then the footer title that's inside of it. So footer groups and then footer title, just like so. Now, as far as the font size, I want it to be inherited from its parent. Then what I want to do is add a little bit of padding top, which is going to be 8.8 rem, or 8 pixels. Then the font weight is going to be slightly lighter. So I'll do something like base of 100. And now I'm going to go ahead and select the footer link. So the footer link will have a display of block. And now they're basically going to be taking all the available space right here, as opposed to before when it didn't have it because it was inline. So it basically just kept like being on the same line. So keep in mind that even though now they're like on the same line, they're still taking 2, like spanning 2, I should say, spanning over 2 cells. So after that, I want to add a margin top for separation. And I'll do 1.2 rem. Then as far as the color, again, I'll just do inherit. And that's going to inherit the white color from the parent, which is what we have right here on the main footer, the light color. Then I want to style the divider. So right here, I'm going to select the divider. And I basically want this to stretch from one end to the other. So as opposed to saying, for example, span 4, you could do 2 things. You can do grid columns span the number of grid columns available using the custom property that we have. Or you can just simply do this, grid column, start at 1, and then basically end over here at the -1. As you can see. So no matter how many columns you have, it's always going to end all the way at the end here, where the -1 is. So the next thing after that, I want to give a height. And the height will be 1 pixel. Next, I'm going to give it a background color, which is going to be var brand. So the brand color here, and then the margin bottom for separation of 3.2 rem. So let me just get rid of this right now. We can see the divider. So again, if I get rid of this, you'll see that it doesn't really have a width. We could also do width 100%. And actually that's not going to work because it's only taking whatever space is available to it like that. So we have to make sure that we actually specify the grid column. Again, you could just do 4. So to keep going, I'm now going to basically target the master footer. Again, which is the main footer that I have here. Keep saying master for some reason. And then the remove grid, that's inside of it. Actually, didn't I use the remove grid somewhere else? Let me see. I can't even find the find thing. So find, so remove grid, display block. Actually, kind of makes sense because I was thinking about just having it differently, but since this one has some different styles, I think I'll just keep it as it is right here. So because for this particular one, I'm actually going to be using display of flex as opposed to block. I do want to keep aligning my items to the center though. And then I want to justify my content, a space between, to create separation between them. And then I'm going to select, again, my BTN here for the brand and give it the same line height I had here for this button, just so that they both look the same. So main footer, and then BTN brand, line height of 1.8. Just like so. And just like that, we have finished working on the mobile version of this project. So now let me actually stretch this a little bit more, just so that we can get to the tablet view. So now we can go ahead and start working on the media queries for tablets and up. So the first breakpoint here is going to be at media, screen, and min width. Remember, we started mobile first, so we do min width. And it will be 768. So what do we want to do here? Well, just to simplify this, I'm just going to go all the way to the top and grab all of my custom properties and paste it in here. So what don't we need here? Well, we don't need this. We don't need this either. We don't need the font sizes. Well, not the font sizes, but the font families. What we do need here is this primary, the secondary, the number of columns, and the spacing. We don't need the container. So now all we have to do is just modify this. So for the primary title font size, we have to increase this to 5.6 rem. Then for the secondary, we can just do 4.8. Remember, for tablet view, we want to double this. So we're going to go from 4 columns to 8. And see, like magic, since we already had 4 for this particular section, since 8 divided by 2 is 4, it already takes effect. So that's pretty much responsive right off the bat. For the spacing here, what we have to do is make it bigger. So now 8 rem, and then 4 on the left and right. Now let's tackle things individually as far as what we need to do here. So for the hero, what I'll do is set a min height, and this min height is going to be 62.6 rem. Then underneath, I'm going to select the hero content wrap. And here I want this to span 5 as opposed to the 4 that, so let me go, can I click it? Keep messing it up. So right here, where are you, grid? Oh, right there. So as you can see here, it's basically stretching the available number of columns. So what we can do here is just say that we only want it to stretch, well, or span by 5. So grid column, span 5. Then what I'll do is select the hero description, margin top, and then here on the left and right, 0, and then 0.8 rem on the bottom. Now I'm going to select the grid image that we have right here, or well, the images that we have right here. Something else that I forgot to do, well, not necessarily forgot to do, because I will be doing it shortly, is just switch the order here for this image and this text. And What's the issue here? Well, I should be using the shorthand for margin. So what I want to do now is select my grid image. And I basically want to position it here perfectly aligned in the middle. So for that, we'll use margins. So margin, shorthand. So top and bottom, it will be auto. And then 0 left and right. As you can see, it moved. So if I just go ahead and delete that, it's going to move up. So with that out of the way, what I want to do next is select my text group. So text group, I want to get rid of the margin top that it has because we no longer need it. I want to display a flex. Then what I want to do is change the flex direction to be of column. Kind of just like turns it back to how it was, but the only difference is that here I want to justify my content to the center, just like so. Like right now, you're not going to see much of a difference, but it's going to come into effect later on when we upscale to the desktop version. But for now, we'll just continue working on the rest of them. So I mentioned the order. So to switch the order between the two, for example, all I have to do is just say order 1 right here is going to be order 1. And then order 2 will be order 2. That's just going to basically flip them over. This works with Flexbox as well, not just limited to grid. Then for the video call, I think it was this one. So video call. What I want to do here is just text align to the center because it's going to look a lot better this way. Then the info box. So let's scroll down to the footer right here. So for the info box, I want to span this by 3. So grid column. Let me actually pull up that grid just so that we can visualize it. I can never click this thing. So where is it? Right here. So we want to span by 3 right there. And we also here want to manipulate the grid row as well. So we want it to basically span to the bottom. So grid row, span 2. As you can see now, it's spanning all the way down to the bottom and they're lining up over here. However, for example, if you went ahead and did 5, then it's just going to, well, it's not really going to do anything. But for the time being, we just need 2. As you can see, if we had 1, it's just going to keep 1. And then 2 is just going to stretch all the way down. And this right here is just going to be neatly organized. So right after the info box, what I want to do now is basically show my spacer, which will show over here. And this is going to move over. So spacer, display, block. As you can see right here, it works perfectly fine, but we also have to span it all the way down here so that it moves, so that this moves over as well. So again, I'll just copy this. And like magic, everything is now exactly where we want it to be. So the next breakpoint is going to be for larger screens now. So I'm actually just gonna go ahead and move this down here so that we have a little bit more room. Right there, I think it's fine. And everything looks good so far. And what else? So now that we have that, the next breakpoint is going to be at, let me just copy this portion because we're going to need it. Then we can just paste it underneath. And this breakpoint is going to be at 1024 pixels. Let's not forget the closing curly brace here for the media query. And the only things that we need here is going to be the number of grid columns, because this one is going to be 12 now. And then here for the spacing, this one is going to be 12, and then it will remain at 4 for the left and right. So now underneath, what I'll do is show my navigation. So Nav List. Display will be a flex. List style, none, to get rid of the bullet points. Let me actually just scroll up so that we can see it. Then I'm going to select the nav link. And here the font size is going to be 1.6 rem. Then the color is going to be light. Then, as far as the margin, to create some separation, I'll do 0 top and bottom, 1 rem left and right. Padding all around is going to be 1 rem, just so that I can create a bigger click area. And then the font weight will be bold. Just like so. Now let's also go ahead and add a hover effect. So nav link, unhover, and here I'm going to turn the text decoration to be underlined. And that is working pretty well. So now, as far as positioning the rest of the content, let me just make this slightly smaller. Here I want to select again this content right here in the hero, which is the hero content wrap. And I'll say grid column. So since we have 12 columns now, it means that I can span over 10 of them, starting at, let's say, 3. This way, I'm going to have 2 on this side empty and 2 on this side empty, so my content is just basically going to be perfectly aligned here in the middle. So I want to start at 3, which is going to be over here. And then I want to span 8, just like so. So now we have some space, for example, here at the start, which is 2, and then 2 here at the end. Something else that I also want to do here is text align my text to the center. And that's going to look a lot better. Now for the mobile toggle, we can go ahead and get rid of that. Display, none. Next, I'm going to select my grid image, which is going to be this. Because now that we have a larger grid, we have to modify it. So for example, let me click here and then visualize the grid. You see that we have a bunch of space empty still. So what I want to do here is just say that the grid image is going to span. First, we have to specify grid column and then span 7. Something else that I want to do here is also remove the margin, set it to 0, and then I want to select my text group. And then I'll do the same thing, grid column, except that this one, I want it to start at 9. So over here, and then it's just going to end here at the end. So I'll say 9 for the starting point, and then finish at the end. So -1 over here. Next, I'm going to select the order once more. And the reason why I have to select the order is because remember that we flipped them over, so this kind of just breaks them. But don't worry, we're going to be taking care of that right now. So order 1. We basically just have to do the same thing we did here, since this is the image. And then for order 2, since this is representing the text, where is it? Actually, no. So what I have to do here instead Let's just start from where we had it before. So start, where is it? Right here. Order 2. Well, 1 first. This one is going to start at 1, and it will basically span 4. Just like so. And then for the order 2, remember this is because this is the text, so the text here is a lot smaller. So if I show you here from this example, so you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. This is exactly what we want to do here. So we want to start at 1 and then span 4. Let me turn on this grid as well, just so that we can see things better. And then for this, for number 2, it's basically going to be the 7. So, but it's going to be slightly different though, because of the order again. So grid column, we're going to have to say that it will start at 6. Not 6 rem, start at 6, and then span all the way to the end. So as you can see here, start at 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which is exactly what we have right here. So that's the only thing that's kind of annoying about it. We kind of had to basically reorder things and do the opposite using the ordered class because of how the original styles that we had broke this. So what is there to do next? Well, first we have to come down here for the video call and select the video call and then the text group. So what I want to do here is just start at 2, so grid column 2, and then I want it to span 10. Let's not forget the space here. Again, if I go ahead and turn on this grid, I can never get it right, but it's going to be right here. You'll see that it's going to be the same thing now, except that we have equal spaces here on the start as well as the end. So it's going to be perfectly aligned in the middle. So right here now, if I go to the mobile view, well, not the mobile view, but the desktop view, you're going to see that everything looks perfectly fine. And obviously the links here are not going to be looking right because some of them on the original Discord website have more links than the other. But like I said, they're all exactly the same except for the number of links that they actually have. So that's not something that you should worry about that too much. And if I, for example, went back to discord.com, aside from the animations and all that, you'll see that it looks exactly the same pretty much. And then right here, you know, as I mentioned, they have different stuff. So let's go back inside of the inspector and move this up over here. You'll see that everything looks amazing no matter the size of the screen that you're viewing this content on. So again, if you guys found this video useful, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you still haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe and turn on bell notifications. I'll see you guys in the next one.